What's up, everyone? Today, I've got a really cool lesson. I want to look at, well, as you can see up here, the difference between saber and conocer. Now, in English, those two verbs mean to know. But in Spanish, you're going to use saber for certain reasons and conocer for other reasons. And we're going to talk about that today. And so what I want to do is walk through the conjugations themselves, because really this is an introduction or an example of what we also call an irregular jo verb, because this is irregular in that it doesn't follow the normal conjugation pattern. So we can put that within that category of irregular jo. But either way, I want to walk through the conjugations themselves, introduce you to those, and then I want to look at the reasons, for example, right here and then right here, the reasons that you would use saber versus conocer or vice versa. And really, we're going to boil it down to a couple different reasons, right? And I'm going to change markers. We're going to look at this, use this green one right here. And so it really comes down to, in the case of saber, knowledge or to know how to do something, right? And so, whereas on the conocer side, you'll see to know someone or to be familiar with someone or something. And that can include a city or, things like that. But we'll get into that in a second. But like I said, first what I'd like to do is walk through the conjugations themselves. And so I'm going to start here with saber, and then I'll pronounce conocer. And then, as I said, we'll get into the different reasons as to why. I've given you some examples here on both sides. And then, of course, to finish off, I'd like to do a little practice with you all. And if you want more, or you want extra explanations, or you want more practice, for example, check out down in the description box, and you'll see I put some stuff down there for you all. So hopefully, from this lesson and then what's in the description box, you'll get a really good idea as to when and why to use saber versus conocer, or like I said, vice versa. But let's have a look. So, as I said, this is an example of an irregular jo verb. And by that I mean the jo, or the first person singular, this conjugation, doesn't follow your traditional, say present tense conjugation pattern, and which is typically dropping the ending and adding an O. Obviously, you don't see that there. And so, but anyways, like I said, that's an example for both of these. They're examples, but I don't want to get too hung up on that. I'd rather just walk through the conjugations and show you how to use one over the other. And so, like I said, I'm going to start with saber. And you can feel free to repeat after me. I'm going to run through it the first time, and then, like I said, I'll slow it down on the second round, and you can repeat after me and practice. Sé, sabes, sabe, sabemos, sabéis, saben. Right now, I'm going to do that again, and then you can do it slowly, or I'll do it slowly, and then you can repeat after me. And so, but then I'll do it a third time as well. Sé, sabes, sabe, sabemos, sabéis, saben. Right? I'll do it one more time. Sé, sabes, sabe, sabemos, sabéis, saben. And so, again, if you want to rewind and run through that again, feel free. And now I want to look at conocer. Again, we'll run through this. I'll do it 3 times as well. The first time I'll run through it relatively quickly, and then we'll do it 2 other times, and you can pronounce it along with me. So here we go. Conozco, conoces, conoce, conocemos, conoces, conocen. And so now I'm going to do this slowly, and again, repeat after me, of course, if you want. Conozco, conoces, conoce, conocemos, conoces, conocen. Right? And again, like I said, this is an irregular jo. It's that ZCO you get here at the end. But the rest, of course, like all irregular jos, the rest of the conjugations are what we would define as regular. So, but I'll do this one more time. Conozco, conoces, conoce, conocemos, conoces, conocen, right? And so hopefully you were able to see the different pronunciations there. And now I want to take a look at why I would use one over the other, and then we'll look at some examples. So we're going to, again, start over here with with saber. So we'll start with saber, and then we'll move over to conocer. We'll look at the reasons, we'll look at some examples, and then finish it off here with some practice. And so, like I said at the beginning, saber really, you can boil it down to 2 bullet points, right? Of course, just like with everything, we can get much more nuanced, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to boil it down to 2 points. Knowledge about something, right? Like just knowing facts, essentially. So knowing facts, information, and to know how to do something, like to know how to roll sushi, to know how to dance salsa, like things like that. So that's going to be very different than why we would use conocer, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want to do, I have 3 examples here for you, and I'd like to talk about those examples or just walk through them so you can see really what I'm talking about. And so this first one is yo sé, right? Notice I'm using saber right there. I know. Yo sé que, I know that. Yo sé que tú eres de Chile. So in this example, I am saying, I know that you are from Chile, right? I'm just stating that I know a fact about this person, right? And so, yo sé, I know, right? It's coming from right there. Yo sé que tú eres de Chile. I know that you're from Chile, right? I'm just saying, hey, I know this piece of information about you, right? And so, hopefully that makes sense. Number 2 here is, él sabe bailar bien. And what that's saying is, he knows how to dance well. And again, when it comes to pairing saber with an infinitive, in this case, it's really know, let's try to spell that right, how, and then this is to dance, right? So he knows how to dance well, right? And so again, that's showing a bit of a know-how or knowledge about something. In this case, it's dancing. So, él sabe, right, I'm using this conjugation, él sabe bailar bien. He knows how to dance well. All right. Number 3, sabemos que Bolivia tiene 2 capitales. So again, it's just stating a fact, information, if you will, right? We know that Bolivia has 2 capital cities. Nosotros sabemos que Bolivia tiene 2 capitales. And those capitals are La Paz and Sucre, right? And so again, we're just sort of conveying knowledge, if you will, or information, right? Know-how, right? And so that's how that works. Like I said, we've boiled it down to 2 bullet points, knowledge and knowing how to do something. The knowing how to do something is exemplified here in number 2, right? El sabe bailar bien. He knows how to dance well. And then knowledge is embodied here in 1 and 3, right? With knowing the capitals, or knowing that Bolivia has 2 capitals. Sabemos que Bolivia tiene 2 capitales. And then number 1, yo sé, I know, que tú eres de Chile. Now, I want to come over here to conocer, because that's going to be used differently. And with conocer, it's to know someone. It's more personal, right? So you know a person, right? Like you've met someone and you know them, right? Like not knowing or not knowing the name of the president of a country. That's knowledge. That's saber, right? Rather, knowing that president personally would be conocer, right? Knowing that, say, La Paz and Sucre are the 2 capitals of Bolivia, that's saber. Having been to or stepped foot in, say, La Paz, and knowing it, quote unquote, on a personal level, that's conocer, right? And that's really what's embodied with the use of conocer. And so to know someone, or to be familiar with something or someone, right? And so familiarity and knowing someone on a personal level, that's the conocer, right? That's different than knowledge and facts, which is saber. And so let's have a look at our examples here. I'm going to change it up. We're going to use blue. And so right here, number 1 is, yo conozco a Juan. And then I have a little extra on the end. Es buena gente. He's good people, right? So yo conozco a Juan. And notice I have a little red arrow there above a. That is known as the personal A. And so when we say I know Juan, we've got to put that personal A in there because Juan is a person. In fact, I think some grammar books, if you look at it, it would say a person or a domesticated animal. So there you go, right? And so yo conozco a Juan, right? And so because Juan, as I said, is a person, we would say yo conozco a Juan. You wouldn't say yo conozco Juan, right? Because Juan is a person, right? Now, that's different from Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires, as you all probably know, is a city in Argentina. And so that's not a person. So to say that, in this case, they are familiar with Buenos Aires, you don't put the personal a there because it's not a person, right? So you would say, ellos conocen Buenos Aires. And then I just, like I said, fueron el año pasado. They went last year, right? That's neither here nor there. Most importantly, I want you guys to understand why we do this, right? I just added a little extra at the end for fun, really, right? So, ellos conocen Buenos Aires. They're familiar with the city of Buenos Aires, right? Again, if we're talking about La Paz and Sucre, and they went to La Paz and Sucre, or they just went to La Paz, for example, and they're familiar with La Paz, we could just say, ellos conocen La Paz. Right? And again, no personal A because those are cities and not persons or people or domesticated animals, right? And so so that moves me on down here to number 3. And again, this is asking if somebody is being familiar with a good restaurant that serves sushi, right? And so now this is going to be different than number 8, and we'll get to that in a minute, but this is saying that this person, right, is familiar with, right, tú conoces un buen restaurante para comer sushi. So that's like saying, yeah, you're familiar with a good restaurant that serves sushi, right, or to eat sushi, for example. So that's showing a familiarity with a restaurant, right? That's not asking, do you know if there's a sushi restaurant in this city, right? That's knowledge, right? And so hopefully you start to see the difference. And like I said, when we get down here with some of these examples, particularly the cafe one, right? Hopefully that'll make a little bit more sense. But yeah, so number 3 here, tú conoces un buen restaurante para comer sushi, right? Now you could ask that as a question. Right? Are you familiar with a good restaurant that serves sushi? Or just say, yeah, you're familiar with a good restaurant that makes sushi. I mean, you're just making a statement, really. So, tú conoces un buen restaurante para comer sushi. Again, there's no A there because clearly a restaurant is not a person. And so, tú conoces un buen restaurante para comer sushi. And so that is showing familiarity. And so again, just to reiterate before we do some examples, to know someone or to be familiar with. An example of to know someone with using conocer is our number 1 here. Yo conozco a Juan. And because we have a person there, and you're saying you know them, right, personally, you put the personal A, right, because Juan is a person. Again, an example to be familiar with, you can be familiar with a city, you could be familiar with a good restaurant that serves sushi, for example, right? And so again, you wouldn't use the personal A here. It's not necessary, right? Because it's not a person. But you're also at the same time, in the case of ellos conocen Buenos Aires, is saying they've been there. They've stepped foot in the city and they're familiar with it. Here, tú conoces un buen restaurante para comer sushi, is saying you're familiar with a good restaurant, or you are familiar with a sushi restaurant or a place where we can go eat sushi. So now, like I said, that's different than asking, hey, do you know if there's a sushi restaurant in this town, right? Tú sabes, or sabes tú, if we want to frame it as a question. ¿Sabes tú si hay un restaurante para comer sushi aquí en esta ciudad, right, in this city? So that's different. That's asking about knowledge as opposed to familiarity. Sí. So your response could be, if you knew the restaurant. Sí, yo conozco un muy buen restaurante de sushi. I am familiar with a very good sushi restaurant. So again, that's how these work. One is knowing facts and knowledge. The other one is familiarity with something. And that is, of course, conocer. Facts being saber. So I want to go ahead and open up this time now for some practice, right? And of course, for those of you who want to pause, go ahead and hit pause, and you can run through these yourself, and then you can check your answers with us. But we're going to go ahead and keep plugging away. We're going to change markers. I think we're going to go with red. That pops really well with this blue. And so here we want to decide whether or not we use saber and conocer, and then every time, for every one, I want to explain why we picked that, right? So sort of bringing it back to the top, right? And so let's start out here with number one, right? El blank a mi hermano. First of all, we have a right there. That's a personal A, right? So really what we're trying to say here is he knows my brother, right? And so because we're talking about knowing someone or familiarity with somebody, we're going to use conoce, right? Because that's the el conjugation of conocer. All right? Number two. Tu blank hablar español. So we're trying to say here, you know how to speak Spanish. So knowledge, right? Or know-how. So we would say tu sabes, right? Because we're going to use the tu form. Tu sabes hablar español. You know how to speak Spanish. Tres. Yo blank Miami muy bien. No personal A, but we're talking about a familiarity to a place, right? And so, yo conozco Miami muy bien, right? And so, yo conozco Miami muy bien. I'm very familiar with Miami. That's what you're saying. Número cuatro, nosotros blank jugar al ajedrez. So this is saying, nosotros, we know how to play chess. Ajedrez is chess. So we have jugar al ajedrez, right? So you have that jugar and jugar a, and then whatever, the sport or game is, and then el ajedrez. So that al is a plus el, right? So that becomes a. That's where you get that from. So nosotros, because we want to say we know how to, right? Knowledge or know-how. So we'd say nosotros sabemos. Número 5, ellas ya blank esa playa. They're already familiar with that beach, right? So we want to use conocer because we're talking about familiarity. We're not saying they know how to get to the beach, right? We're saying they're familiar with the beach. So ellas ya conocen esa playa. And again, we're using conocer, but we're not using the A, the personal A, because the beach clearly isn't a person. So ellas ya already conocen esa playa. Número 6, blank 2, ¿cuál es la capital de Honduras? Do you know, knowledge, what the capital of Honduras is, right? So knowledge, so we want sabes, tú, right? That's our subject. We've put it behind the verb because we're asking a question. ¿Sabes tú cuál es la capital de Honduras? Do you know what the capital of Honduras is? And that is Tegucigalpa. Número 7, mi mamá blank a mi mejor amigo. My mom knows my best friend, right? And so, again, we are talking about personal, knowing someone personally, familiarity, and of course, the personal A, because mi mejor amigo is a human being or person, right? And so we would put mi mamá conoce a mi mejor amigo. So lastly, number 8, and this is the one I was talking about when we were right here. So I want to show you the difference between these two. So number 8 is, we got another question here. Blank usted donde hay un buen café? Do you, usted, know where a good cafe is? Right? So again, we're asking for knowledge. Do you know? Not, are you familiar with good cafes, but do you know if there's one? Right? And so that's where we would do sabe usted donde hay un buen café. So we're asking for knowledge, for information, right? And so that's different from tu conoces un buen restaurante para comer sushi. That's saying you are familiar with a restaurant or a good restaurant to eat sushi. as opposed to saying, do you know where a good restaurant is? Again, that's knowledge, that's saber, as opposed to familiarity, right? And so hopefully that makes sense. You know, some of those are a little less clear than others, right? There's a little bit of a fuzzy or gray area in some of those, but for the most part, again, just something to keep in mind, rule of thumb, right, is knowledge. Are we asking about knowledge? Are we asking about information? Are we trying to, in our use of the word know in Spanish, do we want to know something? Do we want to know information? Or are we talking about a familiarity with someone or knowing someone on a personal level? That's really, in a nutshell, what we're talking about when we use saber and conocer. So hopefully that was helpful. And like I said, if you need more help, check out down in the description box. We've got some how-tos, we've got some practice, and yeah, hopefully you'll be able to dial in saber and conocer. So as always, buena suerte y adios.